on Rodder's Garage. I have a 1958 Cadillac Coupe de Ville sitting here in the shop. And on the cart sits a 2013 6.2 liter LS with 6-speed, plucked out of a 2013 Camaro. And well, my job is to take all of this and put it inside this. That's right, LS swapping the 58 Cadillac Coupe de Ville. Let's get started. So, before I can even think about putting the engine and transmission into the engine bay, I've actually got a lot of prep work to do in the engine bay itself and on the engine. Like, for instance, pulling off all the unneeded garbage over there, getting rid of all that wiring, putting the motor mounts, headers on it, stuff like that. In the engine bay, I've actually got a bunch of stuff I want to take care of as well before even thinking about fitting that engine. Most of which is the firewall. You're going to notice down here I have the steering wheel, the whole column out of that Camaro that the engine came out of. Not going to use the column, we're sticking with the original Cadillac stuff, but I am going to try to use the entire, or as much of the entire brake and clutch system out of that Camaro as I can. You're going to notice over here on the driver's side firewall, I've got a single reservoir mason jar style master with a crazy bracket system with some bolts and stuff welded together down there on a lever system. All that's going. And behind that, you're gonna notice under the fender well, there's a big blower motor right there, blower fan coming in that, into that box on the firewall. That's going. I'm gonna try to get rid of that whole section and basically just shave the whole firewall flat. I'll make some new panels to bolt on that are flat in place of those two bulge outs. Gonna do the passenger side as well. And probably pull the heater box and everything out of here right away, because the future plan is vintage air to supply the AC and heat for this build. So shaving the firewall, that's going to be a big part of this. Probably go ahead and try to fit that brake and clutch stuff in it right away as well. After that's all taken care of, I'll go ahead, jump down to the bottom, clean up the entire cradle, get rid of the original engine mounts, prep all that up for install, basically get everything to the point where it could be painted. Move on to the engine, get everything prepped out over there, and then I'll fit the engine in the next video. Once the engine is fit, pull it back out and probably squirt the whole engine bay with some SEM rust guard or whatever I decide, something black to black out the engine bay before final engine bolt in. So that's the plan. I'm gonna start off with pulling off the hood, getting everything cleaned out of here. I'm gonna set you guys up. Let's get this engine bay prepped out and this engine prepped out so it can be installed. Let's go. Yeah. Well, that got rid of some junk off the firewall for sure. I know I said that that was probably the heater box cover. Totally wrong on that. I didn't even look under the dash on here, and this is probably the first Cadillac I tore apart. These are just cold air vents to bring in fresh air from the cowl up here through the vents, bring it down into the passenger and driver compartments. Obviously you saw this one was all rotted out over here, big old mouse nest inside, and the door basically crumbled right off of here when I took the wire brush to it. The heater core is actually under the fender well over here. You can see the hoses hanging down here. The blower motor would blow through the core and then feed into the cab through the inside of the fender well there. That's also all going to get eliminated here when I wrap the firewall up. But at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and get ready to make some sheet metal panels to cover these off. You can see here that these flanges are sticking out that were behind that bump out. I'm gonna trim these off with the Sawzall, cut them right flush with the firewall. Normally I would use a cutoff wheel. I'm a cutoff wheel type of person, but being that it's wide open and I don't want to be blowing sparks inside the car and lighting interior on fire, I'm going to opt out for the Sawzall and or the body panel saw. Get rid of these two flanges and then come up here to the top, and I have to get rid of this flange as well sticking out. Either I can cut the corners out and fold the remaining down with the vice grips, or just take the body panel saw and just zing it all the way around and get rid of the lip completely. That'll give me a nice flat surface to put the new panels on. One other thing I'm looking at too, this one will be easy. I'll probably do that one first, just stick it on because it's flat and I don't have to worry about it. This side over here, I'm kind of looking the way this is designed, and the brake rod had actually came out low like this, as you can see. See it moving inside the car. Well, I guess if you look up here, the reason for that was probably because of the shape of the firewall here. So I'm gonna have to go in there and look at this a little bit once I'm done trimming this stuff off and see exactly where I'm going to be able to put that new brake booster. I might be able to mount it low, you know, somewhere, basically so the booster is right at the top so I can get my bolt holes in here. Gonna have to kind of figure that out based on length of pedal and all that good stuff. So I'll get all this firewall stuff cleaned up here. We'll make this plate and then try to eyeball up how that master cylinder and clutch pedal and all that good stuff's gonna fit over here. So I've got the two panels bead rolled, all wrapped up here, all the holes drilled in them now for mounting. And normally I like to kind of do a diagonal when I'm doing firewall panels, or when I do the actual firewall itself. I like to do kind of diagonals from each side. I think that kind of looks neat, more than just putting panels, different sections on the firewall. I couldn't really do it on here, and I'll tell you why. Because the original bump outs for the vents actually had drains on the bottom. They had big rubber hoses coming off, well, I'll show you, off these bump outs over here, to drain the water, because the water actually flows in through the cowl up there. It's meant for air, obviously, to come in through the vents, but when it rains, guess where it goes? Right down through here, off the top section of the firewall and into that box, and then would drain out of those big rubber hoses on those bump out things. So, and by the way, that's also why that side rotted out. The mice got in there, built a nest. As the water ran in, it rotted the whole bottom out, and I'm actually really surprised that the firewall isn't really rotted at the bottom. I don't really have to patch any holes in the firewall. It rotted the door out, it rotted a section on the far side, but it did not rot any area for mounting, so it's gonna be good to go for that. I don't have to worry about patching. But here's the deal. Now that I have flat panels going on here, all that water is gonna get trapped in there. It's all gonna sit in there. So I couldn't really do a diagonal bead roll, because then it would run down through the bead roll where it bumped up on the center section, and then run down and pool up or come in through the firewall on those original vents. So what I did was, you saw how I bead rolled them. Basically, I have a nice flat right here under this section where I can seal that. I'm gonna put some seam sealer on it before I bolt them on, and then that'll take care of all that. But I still need to get rid of the water. So right here on both sides, there's an indent here and over here, and it's the same way on the other side. So the plan is to basically put a louver here and here. I got those areas marked out where that water will come down and pool up. Same on this panel over here. So I want to basically just put a little louver in here sticking out the front, so as any water comes in, it will just run down the face side of the firewall and not get trapped behind this lower panel or start leaking through the original vents that will be sealed behind this section. So I don't have a louver press. I don't have a louver press, and because I'm only doing 4 of these, I've made one before where I carve them out of solid steel stock and make a die and all that. I'm gonna try, I've never done this before, I'm gonna try to take this 2x4 and buzz myself basically a louver looking deal in here as wide as these marks, and just try to hammer the steel into the 2x4 to create 4 louvers. Let's give it a try. Not too bad. So, the old 4x4 louver die worked out surprisingly well on these 2 panels. They're all pretty much nice and uniform. They punched in surprisingly well for the most part, and that will allow, hopefully allow all that water to drain from that top section up there. So basically at this point I can install the passenger side. That one can get put on permanently. It will not have to come off again. And the driver's side, well, I'm probably going to push the car back next, jump on to trying to get that brake and clutch system in there and see if I have to modify anything on the top of that firewall or anything behind this before it goes on. Actually, this is the passenger side. Behind this is the driver's side. Let's go put the passenger on, move to the brake and clutch. So passenger side is on and it worked out great. Louvers lined up perfectly with those two areas where the water would come and drain down on each side like I showed you guys earlier. I also went in with a screwdriver and kind of smeared that seam sealer flat so there was no high spots in there that would hold any type of water. Try to make it flow as good as possible and not leak down to the bottom. So that side should never have to come off again, and within an hour or two I really hope it doesn't have to come off again, because that seam sealer is going to glue it on there quite well. So moving on to the brake and clutch stuff, I'm going to pull the column out, strip off the booster and the pedals for the clutch and the brake, roll the car back, take a peek under the dash and see where all of that stuff is going to lay out. Is heavy. Man, is that heavy. That is rice. Ugh. So, filled up the better half of a 5-gallon pail with that rat nest that was all packed up in here in the dashboard on the left side over here. And before I finish vacuuming it out, I want to show you, that's the headlight switch right there. That is the headlight switch, and it was buried 8 inches deep in rat nest, and that's really not a good thing. That's a pretty good fire hazard, actually. A lot of times headlight switches get pretty warm, and especially if they're old stuff and have a bad connection, well, a lot of times plugs like to melt right off those switches. So that was a pretty big fire hazard, really. And also the dimmer for the gauge lights, you can see there's a plate moving on a spring behind it. Well, those actually get pretty warm too. That's like a big resistor in there. So having a rat nest packed 10 inches deep around the headlight switch, probably not the best thing in the world. So it's a good thing it's gone now. We'll finish vacuuming this out and get focused on that firewall. it took a little bit of work, but I got everything stripped out of the way here under the dash. The gauges are out, all the rat nests and mouse turds are out of here. The heater box is out, all the defrost ducts, a section of the defrost duct, as you saw earlier, that was kind of in the way, and everything related to the vent on the firewall down there, all cut out of the way. The flanges and the sheet metal that were going to be interfering with the brake and clutch pedal install, all gone. So right now, I already have the brake and clutch pedal kind of mocked up under the dash here from the Camaro stuff, and honestly, I think it's going to work out fairly simple. Probably going to need a little bit of adjusting on the bends of the pedal once everything gets mounted to the firewall. I'm also basically going to have to eliminate the brake light switch on the Camaro pedal assembly here. As you can see, that tab coming down right here, I need to get rid of that because I need about 2 more inches towards the passenger side with the brake pedal, basically for booster to clutch master clearance on the firewall. If I basically put the rod here from the brake pedal right up against the column, give about a 1/4 inch of clearance, then everything should fit perfect under here and on the firewall, and all I will have to do is maybe heat up and bend the pedals just a little bit to make them look uniform and maybe kick them a little bit more towards the driver's side. So I got some stuff to do with those. Mounting them should be fairly easy. I'm going to put a heavy plate, 1/8 inch plate, on the back side of the firewall. I probably also will put one on the new panel that's going to be installed on this side that I did not do yet. Probably put one on there as well in the bead roll section to give it a little more strength there. You guys will see how I'm planning on doing that in a second. Also, throttle pedal, drive-by-wire. This should be fairly easy. If I mounted something like this with a plate on the back side to hold this angle, that should keep the throttle pedal at a nice reasonable angle, low enough to the floor where it's not sticking very high up, and also it should get full throw. Yep, that's full throw right there, and still have enough room under it for carpet clearance and all that good stuff. So this should work out pretty good. I'm gonna go ahead and start making some parts to get it mounted. Let's see how it works out. So I've been playing around a little bit with the placement of the brake booster and the clutch master. Did a little measuring off the engine from the center line of the transmission tunnel over, and I think everything should clear right where it's at right now. I went ahead and trimmed off the remaining garbage from that flange, from the flapper door for the vent down there, just because I didn't want to sandwich more garbage in between there. And as you can see on the back side, I have an 1/8 inch steel plate laying on the inside of the firewall. Those holes match up to the mounting flanges on the brake booster and the clutch master. As you can see here, I have an additional plate cut that fits right on there. And I actually cut an additional plate because once I go ahead and start drilling my holes in the firewall next, obviously the panel is going to get put on like that afterwards. And on the panel, a couple of the bolt holes are going to be coming through this embossed section on here on my bead rolled area. That's about an 1/8 inch deep. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and drill the holes in the firewall, come through, and then at some point, I'm not going to do it right away. I'm going to leave this off until I'm sure the engine fits good in the engine bay. But at some point, once the engine is fit, then I can drill through the steel plate on the inside through this, use the holes in here to reference these holes, and trim this plate down to fit tightly inside of this embossed area. That way, when I crank the bolts tight for the booster and the master and the clutch, I don't crush the face side of this. Also, by adding that on the inside, that's going to be like a gigantic sandwiching action going on here on the original firewall. Plate inside, plate outside. When I bolt everything tight, that's going to supply a lot of strength back into that firewall. I will probably also add a few bolts out towards the corners to really make sure everything stays in place. I know it'll be strong enough being done like that. So basically at this point, I'm gonna drill a couple more holes in there. I have the upper hole in the corner right there. As you can see, that's the upper hole for the clutch master. I'm gonna put a bolt in there loosely, drill through the top 2 holes for the booster, and I'm just gonna hang it on the firewall and be done with this for now. I'm gonna wait till all the engine is fit in the car to wrap up the face panel here and trimming down this panel for the back side. So let me drill a couple holes, hang that booster, and at that point I'll move on and start stripping all that garbage off this engine, getting it ready to slide into the engine bay. So, with the engine in the engine bay, I've learned a lot. First of all, my suspicions were correct. There's no way that oil pan's gonna work out in here. As you can see, I'm about, I don't know, 7-8 inches in front of the drag link, and I got about 6 or 7 at the back over here to the firewall yet, and I would like to leave myself an inch or so there, so that is never gonna work. I already called the customer, we talked it over a little, we picked out an oil pan, got it ordered already, and we also decided to go ahead and put a brand new wiring harness in for the lighting and the vehicle itself, just because everything was in such bad shape. As you saw earlier, I cut that off at the firewall. Just gonna start over on all that. All the plugs and connections were falling apart, rotted off. So I'll put a brand new, probably just like a Speedway hot rod harness in it, and then we'll piggyback the Terminator X off of that. Just have all new wires in the thing. We already got everything stripped out under the dash already. Now is probably the time to do that new wiring harness. So
Engine bay stripped out, engine in. Yep, gonna need that oil pan. On the other side though, I did notice that my brake booster is gonna work. It's gonna work great. I'm actually right up against it now. Actually, that would work if I sent the engine back right there. But I'm actually 3 inches at least towards the driver's side from the center line here to that mark on the firewall over there. So by the time this gets centered out and lowered in, gonna have plenty of room over here on the booster. So I can go ahead and basically at this point pull this thing out, which I'm going to do. And go ahead and finish that firewall, brake, and clutch system setup. I am also going to have to trim out the floor big time. Right now, the output shaft is hitting the stock Cadillac cross member. It's butted all the way to it, so actually the engine won't go back any further than it is right now. And it's also jacked right up into the floor pan at the current moment, so I know I'm going to have to do a fairly large tunnel, probably all the way from a little bit up into the firewall all the way back to the output on the trans. For the most part, especially seeing that the shifter is all the way at the back, I'll probably have to clearance all that out and build a whole new tunnel from the back of the trans to the firewall. So it's gonna work out, but basically I'm limited and I can't do anything till that oil pan shows up. Another thing is I checked the headers out and I figured these would work. There's plenty of room in the engine bay here, but these are gonna work great. These Clipster style LS headers, plenty of room at the back, and the way the frame bubbles out back here like that. I don't think there's going to be any problems or clearance issues with the headers that I chose for this thing. So that's going to be it for this one. I got a lot done so far. I actually spent a whole day and a half inside the car. Got everything stripped out, cleaned out, got the dash stripped out, heater stripped out, engine bay stripped out, dash stripped out, and everything stripped off the engine, and did the first test fit. So it's all going to work out great. Once that oil pan comes, I can really get things moving along here, get the engine mounted, and get into the point where we can start wiring and doing all that fun stuff with it. So brakes are going to be next. I'm going to pull the engine and trans right now. I'll start off with the brake and clutch system in the next one, and hopefully by the time I wrap that up after a day and a half worth of messing around, hopefully that oil pans here, I can swap that out and move right into the engine install in the next video as well. So thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it. Till next time.